I'm Angelica Ramirez. I'm a bonsai student and the current apprentice at the U.S. National Bonsai and Penjing Museum, and you're listening to Bonsai Time Podcast. So we go through, and who do I find watering? I think at that time it was happened to be Mary Madison's buttonwood.
Mm-hmm.
What a coincidence, what
Mm-hmm.
a nice coincidence. A Florida bonsai, I have, walk up, and Andy, who's
Mm.
assistant curator now, was, well, I think he was then too, so it doesn't, it's the same thing. He's
Yeah,
still
yeah.
assistant curator, yeah. He was watering it,
Mm.
and me being my extroverted self, there's no way I wasn't going to pass up the opportunity. I started talking to him. I struck up a conversation. I told him, that I just started bonsai, and, relatively new, because I mean, in the grand scheme, and I think about it, I've only been in bonsai 4 years right now,
Mm.
like
Mm-hmm.
4 years. So,
Mm-hmm.
so this is like what, 2 years ago? Like that's it, So yeah, I started talking to him. I got really nerdy about the pots. I wanted to ask like who made this pot and whatnot, and I struck up a conversation. And then he told me that they had an apprenticeship.
Mm.
That was it right there. I was like, oh, that's exactly what I've been searching for without knowing. You know. So then the next for I immediately, when I went home, I started writing up all my stuff, putting my resume together, doing everything I needed to do that I could think of, and I decided, you know what? I have so little experience. I have no horticulture background. I
Mm.
don't have a degree.
Mm.
I have a pilot's license, but that's not really going to help me. So, so like, how can I get myself up there? Because I'm going to be competing against people. This is the National Museum. Like, this is so prestigious. There's, I had to stand out. I
Mm.
had to stand out. So I made it my business to, through David, he was the starting point. I was able to get information for different people, to get like advice. That's all I wanted. I wanted input and advice for what they were looking for, because I had no idea what they were looking for. I didn't
Mm.
know if they wanted someone super experienced with a horticulture background, degree, everything. So like, I wanted to see, okay, what do I need to do to get myself into the running for this,
Mm.
right? So I got information for this person that led to this person. I ended up talking all the way to Aaron Packard in PPM, yeah. And that led me to Chris at Chicago Botanic Garden,
Mm.
because he used to be because Aaron had worked. He had been a former curator, right? I'm not sure.
Assistant curator, I think.
Assistant
Yeah.
curator. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he had been a former assistant curator, so I asked him for his input. It was great. And then I got to Chris because he had been an apprentice, which was perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to, someone that's been an apprentice, they know what it's like, what are they looking for. So I got really good input from Chris as well. I even got my way all the way to Michael, the curator here. And I talked to him on the phone. I talked to him, and so, yeah, but by talking to Chris, we ended up having a very lengthy conversation.
Mm.
And, he asked me about myself, and I told him, my passions, and, I told him about my bonsai journey. And, it is more than just the advice for the curatorship, the curator apprenticeship.
Mm-hmm.
At the time it was called First Curator's Apprenticeship. Now
Right.
it's called Bonsai Apprenticeship. The U.S. National Bonsai and Penjing Museum Bonsai Apprenticeship.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's correct. So yeah, talking to Chris, it went so well. By the end of the conversation, he informed me that he was actually going to be starting his own internship there at the Chicago Botanic Garden. And I thought that was fantastic. I was like, well, I'll look out for it, and I'll send my application to that too. Just why not?
Mm.
And I ended up hearing back from both. I had interviews, with both, and at the time I had a schedule conflict because because of COVID, I had pre-planned for all those years, the year or two that COVID had delayed it, I had
Mhm.
planned that trip back to Peter.
Right.
And that was last year.
Mm.
So that was set. That was set for so long. Like I was like, I made it my business. Not only was I going to visit Peter, but I was
Mm.
going to visit. I was going to go. I timed it so I could go to a really big bonsai show, the Bonsai Expo UK. I met some of my favorite potters. I made sure to time it so I can meet everybody.
Mm.
I met some amazing artists. I got to meet Tony Tickle, Harry Harrington. Like, oh my God, all these amazing Alex from the European Bonsai Potter Collective, my friend. I'm just shouting out people now.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Yeah. So it was just a phenomenal potters, phenomenal trees. Oh my God, beautiful in every way. I mean, this is one of the first uh, shows I'd ever been to that you could tell they really took that time to really pair that tree with that pot and that stand and that kusamono. Oh, beautifully. I mean, that was true. That was art. Yeah. I mean, you could even the craftsmanship of the tables themselves, beautiful. I mean, that's where I really started appreciating all the little details of not just the tree. I was already super obsessed with the pots by then, but not just the tree and pot, but also the display, all the
Mm.
little parts that go into it, and it's really, really beautiful. Anyway, so I already had this trip planned
Mm.
well in advance, and I wasn't going to move it. When I commit to something, I commit. Like there's no changing it. I'm a woman of my word. So that was going to be. Oh, I also combined it with another trip to Spain, where this time I did it. I went and rode bicycle across all of Spain with my father this time because we're cyclists.
Wow. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
So I combined it all in one. I wasn't going to lose my chance because COVID had happened for all this time. We're like, okay, let's get it all at once, So I immediately I did. First thing we did was cross all of Spain on bicycle. I got to meet Luis Vallejo. I made it my business to go to Madrid just to visit. I have to make some bonsai out of everything now, So
Same for
gotta be
me. Yeah.
bonsai related, So it's, at some point visit something bonsai. So I got to meet one of my favorite bonsai artists, Luis Vallejo. I got to see his museum, gorgeous museum. Oh my God, if you've never been, highly recommend. Stunning museum. And I got to meet one of my favorite potters in the whole world. Her name is Maria Gonzalez. Maria
Mm.
Jose Gonzalez. All right, and she also lives near Madrid. She was super sweet. I got to see her whole workshop, their kilns, everything, how she does everything, and I got to meet her dogs. And it was yeah. So I have a friend there now, and then after that, I took a short plane ride to England, and I did my weeks intensive course there, where Peter put me through the ringer, but it had me work on just challenging me. It was honestly a very good experience. He challenged me to my limits. Like I there was one day I went back to he calls it the bungalow. It's like the guest house,
Okay.
right? And I honestly I felt like crying. I felt I had failed. I had wired. He wanted me to do an entire. He gave me the stock material, and he wanted me to a Bovenensis pine. And he made a video for this week.
I was gonna ask him, like, did he film this
he
too?
made a video. He made a video, and the video
throw
is
on more
much
stress on
nicer.
you.
Yeah, the video is much nicer than how I, felt, because it was actually 2 takes. It was 2 Bovenensis pines.
Mm.
First of all, I never worked on a pine ever before. It's my first time ever working on a pine. I don't even really know what a Bovenensis pine was, but so it was my first time working with pine. It was actually 2 of them. So the first one was he handed it off to me, and he said, okay, you're going to take it out of the container. You're going to, it's just a plastic container. You're going to expose the nabari. You're going to, do all the work. You're going to make a tree out of it. I want you to do every step from, the base all the way to the styling, wiring, everything. And pick a pot for it, like all of it. And I don't think I ended up picking a pot for it, but I did everything else. But this was in the morning, first thing in the morning, and I took the entire day past closing to work on it. I was so frustrated. I ended up wiring the whole thing out of my nervousness. I had no idea what I was doing. So I decided, okay, I'm going to wire the whole thing. And then at the end, I'll move things and figure out what to cut then.
Hmm.
And, this is one of those moments I had that panic that I didn't want to cut anything. I was afraid, and at the end, he goes in and he just changes the whole thing. And, it's a very humbling moment. And I felt like crying. I was beat up. I felt like I failed,
Hmm.
because what he made out of it after, he explained to me his reasoning, why he did things, and it made so much sense. And I was kicking myself why I didn't figure that out, I mean, obviously I'm learning, but
Right.
you're your worst critic, right? So
Yeah, I mean, you don't know what you don't know.
yeah, exactly. So then, I didn't sleep well that night. I was so upset. But the next morning, I told myself, we're gonna do this again. I went up to him and I asked him, give me another one. We're gonna
Hmm.
do another one. Yeah, I need a second. I need round two. I need round two. I'm not gonna go home and let this pine beat me. So I did another one. That one turned out way better because now I had that experience from failing on the first one, which wasn't really a failure, honestly. It was just that I didn't know what I was doing and I
Yeah.
was too afraid to take any action.
Yeah, you
Uh,
didn't see the tree for what it was giving you, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So the second one, I was much more confident. I just went for it, and
Hmm.
I wasn't as afraid to mess up the tree. I mean, of course, you don't want to mess up the tree. They're not cheap, like this is his stock that he makes, beautiful bonsais out of to sell for his business, So you obviously you don't want to destroy. This isn't my mom's tree in the backyard, But
Right.
I had more of that confidence. That, okay, go for it. Just do it. Make the mistake. It's better than just being static and not doing anything and then end up wiring the whole day.
So would you say that you were able to find your personality into what you're doing with your work then?
I don't know. I honestly don't know if when it comes to personality.
Because from my opinion is we're always trying to find our own personalities in our trees, right? Because the people we study with have their
Yeah,
quirks and
yeah,
quips, right? And
yeah,
then from what you just said, feeling more confident and comfortable,
yes,
you're very much I'm going to do this. That's your
yeah,
personality right there.
yeah, exactly. Sorry, a little confused, but yeah. So yeah. Yes.
So it turned out well. Yes.
Yeah, it did. It was much better. And after that, I was much happier. It still wasn't easy,
Hmm.
but at least I knew that and sometimes you have those moments that you realize, sometimes the most basic lessons that you learned when you started bonsai are the same lessons you're learning again and again as you get more advanced. And the same thing happens in music and the same thing happens in archery. And I always forget it, but it's the truth. It's something so basic as,
It just stings more because you're like, why didn't I do that? Right.
exactly.
It's
Yeah.
like, ah.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
So,
psha, psha.
yeah. So, yeah. So that was a good confidence boost for me. That it's not about being perfect. It's about again going for it and trying,
Hmm.
like you said, to find your personality and find that confidence in your work, right?
Right.
So yeah. Anyway, so that was that trip. That went very well. He ended up recording it because
Hmm.
he put it out as another video recently.
I'll have
Uh,
to watch it. Okay.
and he invited me back after that because I again wasn't gonna give up.
Hmm.
I worked my butt off, and at the end of it, he invited me back, but this time for an actual internship. So he told me that I would be able to stay at his guest house for a month or two, however I can make it work, and that he would teach me. So
Hmm.
I could be his apprentice, and I was like, I died. I died a little bit that day. Yeah, for me that was awesome. So I'm still, that's the next. At some point when
That's on the docket.
that's on the docket. That's coming up. Yeah, I don't. As soon as I get the chance, it's the time. Because that's the thing is I want to be able to dedicate my
Hmm.
time to it. I don't want to be rushing through these things. So
Hmm.
although I seem to be going very fast, I like to really focus on one thing. Okay, this internship. Okay, and this internship, and then this one. Just
Hmm.
not trying to roll into the next one. I'm not necessarily looking at, okay, what am I doing next? I know
Hmm.
I have a ton of things I can do. So there's a whole list. When I write them down, it's like, oh my God, it's overwhelming. It's
Hmm.
overwhelming because I still do my cello. I
Mm.
still, I still teach my students. Doing the internship, I still do my paintings. I like building watches. I do my watch paintings. I do my database. All these things. I have to cycle through them. So if I start thinking about all the different things I have to be doing or I want to achieve, it quickly gets very overwhelming.
Do you see yourself, I don't want to say limiting because I don't like that word, but having to ease up on certain other things that are taking away from this one thing that you're driven for? In regards to, do you see yourself not teaching cello anymore someday in the future, or do you yourself incorporating that in how you do bonsai or something? Your students come and then we'll do a half-day cello, half-day bonsai. I
Yeah,
don't know, just an
yeah,
example. But like, how do you find yourself now, being already having done
yeah,
the Chicago internship, and then to now where you're at the National Arboretum, into this future docket plan of with Peter Chan? How
yeah.
do you not prioritize, but how do you distinguish time availability and access to, if I don't get this done today, I can do it tomorrow, but I need to
Yeah.
get this thing done. You know what I mean? How do
Yeah,
you go?
yeah, no,
How does that go
yeah.
about for you?
That's a challenge for me is time management. That's a very important
Mm,
thing. Now, for me, it's very important to prioritize. Right, number one priority for me right now is my internship. Nothing
mm-hmm,
else is more important. Then after that is my students. I have a responsibility to my students. I only have a few students, so it's not like I had before where I used to have
right.
every afternoon. I would go flight school in the morning, and then afternoon, the entire afternoon, I'd be teaching, and then at night, I'd be studying. So
Mm,
I make sure not to waste my time. That's for sure.
right, right.
So, but I always make it work. So, for example, when I was in Chicago, I had my internship during the morning. It was actually a very nice schedule. I would start like at 6 in the morning, and I'd be done by 2:30, and then
Mm,
I could teach my students in the afternoon. I try to put them all in one day so that I don't have anything spread out. So only one day a week is taken with my students. And then the rest of the time, I'm working on other things like the database, or what comes next? What is more urgent? All right. And then there's also the burnout part
yeah,
that goes into
yeah,
play. And
yeah,
the nice thing is that I grew up having a lot of hyperactivity,
yeah.
ADHD. So
Same.
yeah. So, but the way my brain always works, if I don't like something, obviously I don't want to do it,
Yeah.
But when I do like something and I'm obsessed with it, oh my God, that's tunnel vision toward just that. So and
Same.
I have this was not good for helicopter, and this is actually something I had to really practice, was sense of time. I don't really have a
Mm,
good sense of time. I can sit and work on something the whole day and not even notice what time it is. I
mm,
remember one time I was painting, this painting right behind me.
mm,
I was working on it, and I realized it had been 9 hours, and I hadn't taken a break. I hadn't taken a break. I hadn't even eaten. I had nothing. I was just painting. So it's more about me now having to try and, find ways to relax, really, is the
right.
opposite now,
Mm-hmm,
where I can't sit down and just watch a movie. That doesn't
mm-hmm,
happen for me. I'm
mm-hmm,
painting while I watch a movie. So I'm not really watching, I'm listening. And then when it's something really
right.
exciting, really cool happening, I'll look up. But otherwise, it's a show or a movie playing, and I'm painting at the same time. I got my goggles on, and I'm
Mm,
painting. Um, I'm always finding ways to maximize my time. And
right.
as soon as I start getting tired of something, like burnout, I
Mm,
switch to the next thing. So I cycle. So I'm not
mm,
always working on something. And like, for example, this painting, I haven't worked on it in months. It's been
mm,
months since I've touched this painting behind me. I have another painting I'm working on. I work on my watches. I work on my database. Everything I work on, I try to do an update to the database once a month.
mm,
Right? That's the idea, is that it cycles. If I work on the database every day all the time, I would burn out.
mm,
Yeah, right. So that's the way I work my time. If I'm always doing something, I enjoy it though. That's the whole idea. I really enjoy it. It's not like it doesn't really feel like grueling work to me, right? So I actually feel nervous if I'm just sitting and not doing anything. That's why I'm saying before that for me, I have the opposite problem where just sitting on the couch and just relaxing
mm.
is pretty difficult.
Right, right.
Yeah,
No, I fully
I start
understand
getting
that.
all this guilt, and I start
Right,
feeling like really all this anxiety, and I have to, my hands, I need to do something, like I need to
right.
do,
No,
yeah,
for sure. I'm same boat. ADD from when I was a kid.
yeah, yeah.
Ryan knows all
So
about that. We got all these things all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Almost too
I
much.
cycle through a lot of my things. So I don't do everything all the time. And sometimes I can go a week, 2 weeks, up to a month without doing something. And then I come back to it the next month after that.
So did this way that you're scheduling things now kind of establish itself in a foundational component when you're in your internship in Chicago, or is that
Yeah.
prior?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now this one here in DC has been a little bit more challenging because of the drive.
Okay.
So I have on a bad day a 2 hour each way to drive. It's horrible. So I start at 8 o'clock and then I'm done at 4:30. But
Mm.
each way is on a bad-ish day it's 2 hours. On a normal day it's an hour and 40 minutes. On a really, really, really good day, if I'm lucky, it's maybe an hour. So that's up to 4 hours every day that I'm just sitting in a car. That
Mm.
I could be working on something. I
Mm.
could be painting, I could be working my database, I could be doing something, learning something.
Mm.
I've been thinking about, I would love to be able to take some horticulture classes, but where do I have time for that?
Hmm.
So I've had to move my students. Instead of having them all in one afternoon, I now do one every afternoon. I only have a few, so it's
Okay.
three,
Yeah.
4, 3. One of them is intermittent. So,
Yeah.
so every afternoon by the time I get home, I I come in, I get, I have my dinner, I take a shower, I teach, I go to bed. That's all
Mm.
I have time for.
Mm.
Because the drive is just so long. So what I've done is I've started maximizing that time that I'm in the car.
I was
So
gonna ask. Yeah.
yeah, so I got myself. I'll listen to podcasts at the beginning, but then now I started getting some horticulture books, and I've been listening to them as audiobooks.
I was just gonna say, do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, to supplement my lack of horticulture background. So at least it's something I can at least listen to, and then maybe hopefully the idea is I can implement that to what I do at the in my internship every day and have things click. Like when the curator uses a horticulture term that I am not familiar with, you know, maybe at that point, because I've listened to this book while I'm driving, I'm like, oh, I recognize that.
Mm.
Oh, I know what that is.
Mm.
It's not going to be the same as being able to sit down, look at it, write notes, things like that. But it's what I can do.
Right.
It's better
Mentally
than
prepared,
nothing.
right?
Huh?
You're becoming more mentally prepared. I mean, I'm in school for horticulture right now, and there's a
Yeah.
lot. There'll be a lot more that I have to learn on my own, just
Yeah.
outside of everything, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
I
Exactly.
mean,
And like every subject, there's a whole just vocabulary language about that subject to learn before you can really get running with it. So
Exactly.
that's good for that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and of course, I when I go to my internship every day, apprenticeship. I make sure I ask the questions, even if to them it might, which they have told me already. They've been very welcoming, very kind, very it's been great. I've been having such a wonderful time. There's no such thing as a stupid question, right? So I'll ask something that what does that mean? It could be something basic to them, that it's in plant biology. It's like, oh my god, how do you not know this? But they have been kind enough and open enough that I can ask something like that, and they'll explain it to me.
mm.
Yeah, Michael will the curator will go up and draw it on the board and explain it to me. So that it's been really helpful that, I feel like I have that environment where I can really open myself up and learn and not be afraid to ask those questions. And so far, both apprenticeships have been like that. My internship in Chicago and here have been like that. And it's been wonderful.
That's what we've run into as, I said earlier in that we started the Bonsai Club at Ohio State University.
Hmm.
Or the Ohio State University. Pardon. Apologies, Ohio State.
Don't forget
No,
that.
no, be careful. Watch out. Look at you. Trademark. Danger. We've run into that too, where we had to pull ourselves back and really reevaluate, how does it feel to start over?
Yeah.
Where does it mean to come in not knowing anything? In our combined experience, we have knowledge, different approaches, different experiences, but it's like, oh, we need to reevaluate and ask ourselves those same questions. I appreciate you bringing that up, because that's a lot of things that we get asked all the time, just by students or just people have reached out to us because we have a podcast now. It's like, what about this? We're like, oh, we never thought even about asking that question,
Yeah.
And it's like
something that's simple to you might not be simple to someone else. And it's not that, that they're dumb for not knowing, you
Yeah.
know?
I mean, I'd say I feel like I lost the innocence, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's like,
yeah,
it's
yeah. And that's also that's tricky, especially when you're trying to teach. So the same thing
yeah.
happens with my students, and I always go back to that because actually teaching for me, this is the reason why I never want to quit teaching my cello
Mm,
students. It has been as much as they learn from me, I learn probably just as much from them in the sense of, you know, how to teach, right? How to get your experience across in a way that they'll understand it. And there's so many times, especially when I first started, that I'll explain something, I'll talk about it, and then realize they don't know what I'm talking about.
exactly.
To me, it's simple, but to them, they're like, "That's alien language," you know. You know, and it could be just one word. It could be one word that throws off the entire thing, you know.
Mm,
So to be more aware of, okay, I might how can I take my knowledge and simplify it in a way so that no matter who I'm teaching, they'll understand it.
do you have a set standard of like how you approach that now, as far as like,
No,
because
I
you've been
teach every
teaching
student
cello for so long, right?
You just keep trying
Oh,
different
okay.
Yeah, I
explanations.
teach
Kevin.
every student. I mean, I've taught everything from very like I think 5 or
Or
6
if you have like a
years
fail
old.
safe method, I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's hard. I mean, I have a basis for like, you know, curriculum.
Hmm.
Well, when it comes to like analogies or how I
Right.
explain something, or you know, obviously depending on the student, it changes. So if I might have a student, I've had students that range all the way from like 6 years old all the way to my oldest one. He's almost 80 now.
Very
And then
cool.
I even teach students with disability. I have a
Hmm.
student with cerebral palsy, right? So that all those different backgrounds, all those different types of people, you know, it makes it a real challenge. How do you teach, you know, the student that has lived their whole life already, that they don't have the dexterity of a young child, but they have the mind and the dedication, right, of an
Hmm.
adult, right? So that's
Yeah.
different. And then, you know, our kids soak up things like a sponge, but they don't, sometimes they don't really
Yeah.
grasp everything as much, you know.
Hmm.
And then also, and the biggest one was the with disabilities. You know, how do you get someone that can't even control? They don't have any really
Yeah. Motor
motor
function control,
function.
right?
It's
Yeah.
hard, yeah, for them.
Yeah.
So having to adapt myself to
Mm.
how I explain these things, um, depending on the student. So that willingness to be able to change up the explanation, simplify it just that little bit more, or you know,
Mm.
get it so that they do. Oh, I get it now. You know.
Do you
So
think also just putting yourself in that position of like, whether it be explaining something at a bonsai club, for example, or within your cello students, you know, realm, just having an experience and reflecting like you did with Peter's work,
yeah.
what can I do better now? Like, I know
Oh,
Ryan's doing a presentation this weekend about some collecting things, you know, with Yamadori, Yardadori, and we're probably going to reflect on it later. But the fact is, you know, keep pushing yourself to do better, right? That's what I'm getting from what you're saying.
yeah, that's super important, you know, for everything. You have to analyze. Now, of course, there's a difference between being too self-critical and just analyzing,
I was going
right?
to ask, how do you know when you've done your best into not being your own worst critic?
Yeah, so a lot of times I'll try to involve someone else in my analysis because typically they're less biased, you know.
Yeah.
So and they don't have to know anything about what I'm doing. So you know, I mean, it does help. Like for example, when it was either in music or in archery, after a competition, there's recordings, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to watch yourself compete. You have to
Right.
watch yourself play, and you have to suffer through it. And you have to watch yourself, even though you're cringing. You just watch it, and then the person next to you, you know what they usually say? It's like, "Oh, that's pretty good."
Like,
Excuse me.
come again?
You know? So just having that person there that is able to kind of bring you back up and remind you it's nothing in the world. It wasn't as bad as you really think. Now let's go through it and okay. And this is what I do with my students all the time. I have them watch their own recordings and I tell them, okay, what did you like and what do you think needs improvement? And I do that same thing with myself all the time, with anything I do. So the same thing with bonsai. I watch the videos that Peter puts out. I look at my work that I've done before, right? I go back to my trees at home and I look at and I try to analyze as if it wasn't me, right?
Mhm.
As if it's just another student. I'm not going to be harsh on another student.
Right.
So
Fresh eyes, right?
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
my idea is that it's like taking myself out of my own head and
Mhm.
kind of analyzing myself and the work I do as if that Angelica was a different person, which you can translate that to the idea of that's past Angelica. That's not
Right.
current Angelica. So
Right.
past Angelica made the mistake. Let's figure out what the mistake was. Future Angelica is not going to make that mistake.
Right.
Yeah.
Did that internship you did, because I know now you're talking about apprenticeship, but internship
Yeah.
back in Chicago, how long was that for actually? Was it like 6
Yeah.
months?
So we go on tangents and then
No, it's all good. It's all
yeah,
good. It's
okay.
having stories.
Yeah.
Great.
So yeah, Chicago. After I got back, that was the reason. Yeah, going.
Yeah.
Now I'm kind of recuperating. So
Right, because you went to Peters, did the
came
work at the
back.
Pine, did it again, came back. Yeah, after he had approached you with doing an internship, right? But you already
Yes.
had this.
So I was between here at the National Museum and the Chicago, and the problem with here was we had just started the interview, so there was nothing set or anything.
Mhm.
But there was obviously a conflict with that trip to England.
Mhm.
So I decided, and I talked to Chris, and he told me that he would be willing to shift the apprenticeship to the internship to start later.
Okay.
So I thought, perfect. So I sent very as nicely written as I could say it to here in DC, and I said, I thank them for the opportunity. I want to be able to dedicate and focus on this, so I'm going to apply again. I'm going to apply again next year. And that way, I don't want to burn that bridge. Like
Right.
how to decline. I never have to. How do you? Not that I had gotten it, but it was more of like I was in the final interviews. I knew they were going to be choosing someone, and I decided to go ahead and say, before wasting their time, I said, okay, I know we have this conflict of time with the whole trip and everything. I'm so sorry about that. I explained the whole thing with the commitment. I'm not going to break the commitment, that kind of thing, and that I will for sure be applying the next year, which is a woman of my word.
Right. Now
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah.
So then I went to Chicago. So Chris offered me the position and I accepted it. So after I came back from England, I went straight. I flew from England, immediately picked up the car, moved up to Chicago, immediately after just 3 days, flew back to Florida, did the demo for because the scholarship competition thing.
Yeah.
I had to do the demo, and also I did the demonstration with David at the convention.
Mm-hmm.
And then I flew back after the weekend and then started work. Wow. Yeah, that was crazy. Yeah, fun fact, I parked in the wrong airport parking lot, and I came back with a $300 fine. That was, never again. I'm taking an Uber next time.
Like, Chris, can you help me?
Yeah, right. But yeah, and then that was a great experience. That was 6 months. I ended in November.
Mm-hmm.
And although I missed most of the repotting season, I firmly believe that was a great first internship. I mean, that was exactly what I needed. Exactly. Honestly, when I go to this apprenticeship now, that having that background from Chris and working at the Chicago Botanic Garden, that saved me. Like there was this, because this here at the National Museum it's so much more.
Right. You gotta be dialed in, right? Like, you gotta be dialed in every day.
Yeah.
Right?
And if I hadn't done that one first, I would have been a fish out of water feel, like it would have, yeah. So that was a phenomenal
serendipity.
First experience. I got to, learn how to work with a curator, work with a massive collection. I mean, it's over 270 trees of all different types. So it's not just all exhibition display trees. They're also everything from all levels of development. That's the
Mm.
nice thing. Chris has all these different levels of development, stuff that he wants to play with and, figure out. And one of my favorite things that he would do was he would do a tree of discussion.
Mm.
Well, it lets you get rid of that fear of, okay, even though he's the curator and he has that eye, and you're trying to learn that from him, you're trying to figure out, okay, what is it that he's seeing, right? But it doesn't matter. It doesn't have that intimidating feel. He encouraged everyone, including the volunteers, everybody. We had for the military veteran program, there's an internship for them as well. So
Cool.
we had a veteran that joined us as an intern as well, with no bonsai background, and even he got to have input on how we should style a certain tree. So Chris would bring in a tree, and everyone had to take a turn, looking at it, turning it, like, okay, make your decisions, like figure out what you would do with it. And then he would start one by one. Okay, who wants to go first? And then this volunteer would say, and then this other person, then I would say, and then at the end, when everybody had taken their turn saying their idea, we would go up and manipulate it and be like, okay, I think we should cut this. And by the time I was done with the internship, everybody was like, that was fun. That was great. Everyone looked forward to it. It wasn't a scary thing, It wasn't intimidating. It was really fun. And at the end, Chris would say his idea. And a lot of times, it was like, oh, the light, it was
mind blown.
Yeah, mind blown moment. Like, how? Did not see that, So, yeah, Chris, phenomenal teacher. He really knows how to teach. Very open to questions, learning environment. I've been very lucky that my mentors have been honestly just great, all of them. Yeah. So I got to have the experience for the first time of working with all different levels of trees, working with so many different species that I never worked before, because I'd only really worked with some tropicals and a few junipers, that's it. That's all my experience. And there in Chicago, it was, oh my God, suddenly you had over 100 different species, different taxa. Like it was so many, and at the beginning it was a little overwhelming, but the environment was so welcoming and so, forgiving, in the sense, like, it's all about learning, that I quickly, you get to know the trees, it's like you make friends with all the trees,
They come form the family, right?
Yeah, you get to know them, everything. He taught me how to water correctly, how to wire correctly, all the basics that I thought I knew somewhat. Again, I never go in thinking I know something, okay? Because there's always a different way that might be better. And sometimes you could have two ways that are really good, and one just works better for you. That doesn't mean one's worse or, or better. So
throughout this time, is that when you started the pottery database?
No, I'd done the database before that.
Okay, because I know Ryan wanted to talk about that a bit in regards to all
well,
that.
there's a lot of things to talk about here, so we can describe that later, or we can have a tangent right now about it.
Yeah, tangents are obviously, I'm always giving tangents here. I'm always going on tangents.
Well, my main question was, earlier you had mentioned this pottery database, and for people that don't know, you basically you made this website. People can contact you and get their pottery listed, like wherever they are in the world on your website. Is that accurate?
Sort of.
Okay.
Sort of. So it's a database. The way it came about is, in my obsession and nerdiness for bonsai pottery, I started collecting pots. I really like collecting pots. For some reason I really gravitate towards the pottery. It's a shame that I'm not a potter yet, but one day. Anyways, but I would collect the pottery, and I was just so fascinated. Just like the trees, you had artists for the pots, and it was global. Like I constantly, especially during COVID, right? I spent all my time going online, researching, looking up videos, looking up pictures, scrolling through Instagram, following a bunch of potters. And before I knew it, I had this whole list of potters that that I knew about, that I was friends with, and I would go to, like, at some point again, COVID makes this all very fuzzy, but I would go to my club, all right, then a club meet or the convention or wherever I meet, bonsai people, and I would want to talk about pots, like not just the trees. I want to talk about the pots too, and you'd be surprised. I was so surprised with like how little information was out there about potters, because everyone talks about Japanese potters, like tokonami pots, that was like the thing. But like, there's so many amazing potters and pots out there all over the world. I just wanted to nerd out with somebody, So I was like, at that time I'd already made my website, another COVID project. I made my website for my art because I was doing a bunch of art during COVID, and I've been doing art since college, but do my dot paintings. But so I made the website as like a portfolio. My paintings take so long, it's virtually impossible to sell anything. It's more just I gift them, things like that, and maybe once in a while I might sell something, but it's mostly just for me, So I made the website, and I thought, you know what, let me put this list on there, and I thought about, okay, how am I going to do this? Like, this list is getting pretty long, right? And I thought, why don't I make this super easy, right? I thought, you know what, let me just, I just kind of built off of it. I kind of thought, okay, instead of just a plain list, how am I going to organize it? Because there's different countries, there's different states, and especially in the US, and there's so many different, how do I organize it? So eventually I just started organizing it. This wasn't published it took me over a year to build this. This is just me having a good time instead of buying pots, I was collecting potters in a sense. That was, because it was getting out of hand. The pots were getting out of hand. I have in my house, what used to be my bedroom is now my studio, and the entirety of the biggest wall I have there, I have put bookcases and display cases, and the entire wall is covered in pots on pots on pots. I started running out of space. So
are they all varying sizes, or just
Yeah. And my thing, I like to collect pots from different potters. It's not about collecting pots for trees. It's not about collecting a certain type of pot. It's about more of, okay, let me see the art in the pot itself and see how it differs throughout different cultures and locations. I like finding new potters and then finding a piece that I really like and then buying it and then collecting that. And so when you look at my collection, there's a lot from all over the world, from all the different continents. I was super happy the day I got my first pot from Australia, and then I got one from Iran, and I was like, it's so cool. And you start looking at them, and you can see how their country, their culture has affected their view of how they make a traditional pot, a more traditional pot, right? Because a lot of people, everyone takes inspiration from the original, right? The Chinese and the Japanese pots, but then people have their little personalities and what they do with them. So I got really obsessed with collecting pots from different potters in different parts of the world. And so that eventually transformed into, instead of buying so many pots, let's just collect the potter names. Let's discover new potters all the time. That became my hobby. Discovering potters and writing them and kind of doing a collection for my own sake, of potter names. And then that eventually transformed into, okay, how am I going to organize it? And eventually just kind of, with the help of, inspiration from a lot of people, I would talk to people and I talked to a lot of potters. I know I got a lot of help at the beginning from Thor Holvilla. I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Holvilla,
yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those, it's one of those things you never really say out loud, and then when you finally have to say it, yeah. So he was actually the one that inspired me to do this database, not because it was the database itself. I had before I got into the database, again, collecting pots, I was photographing my pots. That's another one of my hobbies, is photography. So I would go and I would take an artistic, cool photo as cool as I could get it of a really interesting pot, you know, that no one's seen before. And I would post that online, and I would do that. I would do that a lot. And that was back when my collection was relatively small.
Mm.
Yeah.
How
And
many, real quick, how many potters are on the database now? Do you know?
oh, like I think last time I updated it was 417 in 48 countries and 2 territories.
How many people do you know? How many people like do you reach out to people, or do you have people reach out to you, or both?
Most of it is me finding them. Now,
Okay.
the way I designed the database is I wanted to keep it simple. When you have so many people, I started noticing very quickly that the number of people was going up like fast,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
By the time I launched the database, I had 292 people that I had accumulated. And so I had to figure out, okay, I saw that the other databases, the other resources that are out there, you know, like you have great ones, you know, American Bonsai Ceramics, you know, there's a
Yeah.
lot of good, you know, resources, but the obstacle I was finding for myself was that, okay, when you have this many at this kind of scale where you're doing global at this point, you can't include pictures. You
Yeah.
can't, you know, having those kind of details, having to write the bio for every single one, all that putting the chop, all that, that's just too much work. I'm one person.
Do you
And
put
the
in a
idea,
hyperlink now to their websites
yeah,
and
so
things?
my
Okay.
idea was I wanted to make it absolutely super easy for you to just find the potters in your area and you make the judgment if you like their work or not. You click the link, the links are all color coded, I spent the time finding every link I could find for every potter, and you'd be surprised how many of them aren't linked together. So
Yeah.
like, for example, Facebook, Instagram, Etsy, website, anything I could find, even Reddit, bonsai forums, like Bonsai Nut, you know, like anywhere I could find any mention online of a potter that's making pots, I found them. You know, but so, and there's still more. There's still more that I, you know, don't find, you know, and they come up.
Do you have a set criteria of like accepting people, or you gonna accept everybody in all,
No,
or is it like specifically they only make bonsai pots and no, you know, plateware or anything, or how does that work?
No. So my idea was that I want the community to grow. And a
Hmm.
lot of times bonsai pots is not something you can do as, especially at the beginning, if you're a potter, as a career. You know, like you're not gonna make, you know,
Right.
a lot of times you have to do more functional pottery. But they have a passion for bonsai pots and they make that on the side, you know. And you have some amazing pots from potters that are like that. That it's not just dedicated to bonsai pots specifically. So
Right.
I needed to make my criteria simple and easy to update so that, you know, I wanted something that was current, because you have a lot of people talk all the time. You look at the forums and you say, okay, who's a good potter? Who's this? But then you go look it up and this potter has passed away a while ago. They
Yeah.
retired, you know? So then the question is, okay, who's making pots? Like you know, who's out there? So it felt like the community was very disconnected in that sense. A lot of the resources were outdated. So my thought of, okay, let's start with simple. Active. Who is actually active? How can I verify that activity without having to even ask them? Right? Okay, obvious, social media, website, things like that. If you're posting work, you're active, right? You're making stuff. So what I would do is that I would, you know, I follow all these people, I find them, I friend them, whatever it takes, you know, and I would look at the date, right? I would say, okay, this was posted on this day. As long as it's posted within a year, right? So 1 year of my update, then you're active. Because there's potters that take breaks, right?
Right.
You know, there's a lot of potters that they this is not their day job, you know. They, you know, they have other things they're doing. They take breaks, and sometimes they have a season for working on trees, and then they have a season for working on pots. A lot of potters make pots in the wintertime, you know, and then the rest of the year they're doing their other work. So I wanted to encompass everybody that makes pots, that will continue to make pots. So I thought, okay, a year is a pretty good bracket there.
Well, that's quite a range too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
so
seasonally, like you said.
So the idea is that you are considered an active potter on the database if you have something online, if there is work, if you have posted or someone has posted your work. You see, so I do that research. I take that time to even find someone else posting your work. to see that, okay, there is mention of you. All I need to be able to see is that your work is being put out there, and it has to be for the community. It cannot just be for personal use. So that's the next one. So if you're a beginner potter and you haven't made anything for anybody, you're making it for yourself, I'm sorry, you're not included yet. You need to have a little more experience, right? Right? So it also helps with the experience thing. So now you have, okay, you need to be making pots for at least donation or for selling, or however that it's not for personal use. That means you're making enough pots for more than just yourself, right?
Right.
And it had to have been made within at least one in the last year. That I can see that you posted that one. Usually they make more. It's just sometimes they don't get around to posting anything. Maybe once a year they post one, but then you meet them at a show and they have a whole table full of pots. Like that's the issue. Is like a lot of people not everybody's gonna keep up with the online presence and being perfect with it. So, but that's. Again, my thought was that's up to the potter. That's not a point. I'm not going to go through the effort. It's just too much. Also, who am I to make that call on what is a good pot? What is a good representation of this potter's work, right? I don't want to make that judgment. I don't have that kind of experience. So what I do is I put the name, I sort it by location and by name. So you can go in the database. You can go, my favorite way to do it is by location. It goes by continent, and then it goes by country. If you go to the US, it goes by state. And then you can have a good time. It shows you, the names, and it shows you the links. And it has all the links I found for them. And then you can go have fun clicking. If let's say you don't have Facebook, but you do have Instagram and they have an Instagram link, there you go. Perfect. So you can look through their Instagram, and now you have all their pictures, not just the one that was posted, as a reference. It's all their photos, and then you can make the judgment if you like their work or not.
Nice.
So and that makes it much more efficient. So now I'm able to add more potters that way. So now I'm at, I think it's 417. I think it's 417.
I have looked at it for the last week, but life being busy, kind of
what hasn't so much.
I'm looking at it right now. I was like, there's a lot on there. I've just been scrolling through as you've been telling me. I was like, wow. Would you be accepting of people reaching out to you like, hey, would you want to show your work? And would you ever consider in the future, if you were able to have people help you, I'm not saying that's what you want or need, but if you were to be open to having people just volunteer time, would you ever put a chop mark next to their name?
I'm always looking for ways to improve it. So my latest, I'm trying to, always work on it. I prioritize other things in my life that I need to be working on, like my apprenticeship. But I set goals for myself. Okay, at least once a month, I'm going to go in and I'm going to do an update. And I'm always in the back of my mind, I'm working on a tree, and then I'm formulating what my next update is for the database. So I formulated these things in the back of my mind, what I'm going to do next with my painting, what I'm going to do next with my database. I'm always planning ahead. And then, I get ideas for how can I improve it. I'm always looking for ideas how to improve it. So I would like to include chops. I'm starting to include years. So I reach out to the potter and I ask them, what year did you start making pots? Because that's what's relevant. I want to know what year did you start making bonsai pots? When did you join our beautiful community? Right? So, and that at the same time, that also offers a reference to people that don't know a lot of these potters. It gives a chance for the really professional potters, the ones that have been established for many years, to be seen. And also for the newer potters to be seen. So you can see it. Oh, this is a new potter. I haven't seen this. This is from this year or last year. Let me click on it and see it. Or you can see, oh, this potter's been doing it for 20 years, 20 plus years. So it gives, because again, I don't want to be the person that says, this is a master potter, this is the best. Because people ask me, who's the best potters? I'm not going to tell you. I have my opinions. Exactly. I have my preference.
Right.
But that is not any guide for what.
Well, it's like anything in life, right? Whether it be, like I said, archery, your favorite archer, or, Andre Agassi for tennis. It's like, okay, I like Serena Williams. Okay, whatever. Yeah, exactly. It's our own preference. Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah, so I'm always looking to update it. My what I'm working on in the background that you don't see it also is what I call the archive. Because then this is where I'm trying to include everybody. I want this to be the ultimate resource that you go in and you can learn about all the potters that are currently making pots. And then you also learn about potters who used to make pots. Because how could I make a database like that and not honor the people who have paved the way? So you have people that retire, or you have people that don't have anything online. I meet a lot of potters at shows. The more I travel, the more I meet people. So I meet potters at shows that they have beautiful work, really good stuff, and nothing online. They have nothing, not even a website, no Facebook, nothing. And I'm like, dang, you really need to put some of this stuff online. Like, it would be so good. So what I've started doing is I've been doing the archive section, it's basically all the potters that I cannot verify are active anymore. Right? I can't verify. You could be active, and if they reach out to me, or if I reach out to them, and and they say, hey, I'm making pots, active. I'll make a nice green. I'm still working on it, but it's going to be nice and obvious that this person is still active. They just don't have anything online, right?
So, are you accepting people's help they offer? Would you be willing?
Yeah.
As far as volunteers. So, how can people reach out to you if they're wanting to expand their help to you with this?
This is very new to me. I've had to learn how to build a website on my own and do all this, So, it's always good to make friends that will help me work on it. I would love for this resource to eventually become self-sustaining long after I'm gone. So the idea is, and I would like to expand it. It's not just potters. I would like to expand it to bonsai artists, to bonsai stands, the woodworking, the daizas, working on the stones. Every part of bonsai deserves to be seen. But my template right now is pots. I've started with pots.
Right. And
if I can figure this out and do it right and make it so that it will continue to self-update, self-sustain, and I want to be able to, I'm going to have to start learning how to write programs. So, but the idea is that, if it'll check the links, I'm hoping to eventually make a website a database that it checks the links, it checks, activity, it sends a message to the potter, hey, are you still making pots? You haven't, there's no activity,
so you're looking for more automation.
Automation, yeah. That way, so that eventually, if something happens to me, it can still keep going.
Right.
If something happens to me now, no one's gonna do anything, and it's just gonna get out of date. And
good effort.
Yeah. So what if anybody is interested in anybody has a background in like software engineering or building,
sure, I could find somebody in the bonsai.
Yeah, that would be fantastic, because I don't have that coding background and those kind of things I'm working with software that's pre-made, for website building, but I know it's holding me back. So, and eventually this will get so big. I plan for this to grow so big that, it's going to be a team of people probably at some point.
Right.
So, that's awesome. But, taking those steps, I don't know what I need next. I take advice. I take people, I always ask people recommendations, like, what would you like to see? Obviously things like chops and whatnot, but then chops change too. And it's like, it's so fluid. The community is always moving and growing. And especially when you connect them like this, it's so obvious, and it actually helps them grow even more.
Right.
So that's been my biggest challenge, is how can I, by myself right now.
So for all the listeners out there, she can use some help.
Message Angelica on Instagram.
Go to
Community
Potters.
Community project. Yeah.
Sounds like you found a huge rabbit hole. Like, maybe you didn't know that it could get this big when you first started, but
no, I definitely did not think it would get this big. I'm getting to the point where I'm starting. I'm like, wow, this is
treading water.
Yeah, it's a lot more than I anticipated.
The emergency helicopter preparedness is enacting.
Yeah. So, and right now the problem is I'm having to go like what I've been trying to update besides adding people, because I do get messages. I get potters that want to be added. I'm like, yes, awesome. I love when they reach out to me, because then I don't have to go find them. But the big issue is making sure that everything's up to date, because sometimes links change, links break, right? Checking that they're still active. I have 417 potters on there right now, but that's over 1,000 links. Because each potter has a couple links. some of them only have one, some have two, some have four, some have 5 links, you know, so it depends on the potter. The more, you know, some are more established online, so they have a lot of presence. So they have Facebook, Etsy, you know, Instagram, and a website, all of it, you know. So then, you know, it ends up being where I have to be checking just so many links one by one, you know.
Right.
So that takes a lot of time, and I would like to find a way to automate that, but you know, as long as I'm alive and I can do it, I will do it however I can.
Nice.
Yeah.
So through all your experiences to now, you know, creating all these things, doing all these things, what do you want to do with your bonsai for your future? Once you're done with Peter Chan's internship, where do you see yourself taking your experiences and how to formulate that to teach people, if that's what you want to do? Or do you want to be known as a bonsai artist, or, you know, what facility do you see yourself going into?
People ask me that a lot.
I hate that question. They ask me it too, but I have to ask. We have to know.
Yeah. The thing is, first of all, I don't want to, I'm so new to the community. I have to always remind myself, I've only been in this for 4 years. 4 years. That's it. It's not like I've been in this for 20 plus years and I've, you know, established myself in the community and, you know, like have all this education. I haven't gone to Japan. I have, you know, like it's a whole world I haven't experienced yet. It's so much to do. There's so many people to meet, so many things to learn. For me to be able to just say right now and just kind of close those doors for myself and just say, okay, I'm going to do just this. This is what I want to do.
Or do you have an idea of
That's
what you'd
not
like
really
to do?
me.
Maybe a starting point, maybe,
or like an idea of what
way.
you'd like to do. I mean, that's totally valid too, because it's being like, you know, like you said, in your 20s, you didn't know what the heck you wanted to do.
Yeah.
I'm 35. I'm going back to school, so it's like, hey, I kind of figured it out now, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So
I mean,
for me, it's most importantly, I want to be able to contribute to the community. Because one thing that people don't really understand, for me, this bonsai community, out of all the communities I've been in, because I've been in a lot of clubs for a lot of different hobbies, you know, and it's just, you know, and I meet so many wonderful people, but bonsai is truly the greatest community I've ever been a part of. I have a true love for bonsai. It's unlike anything else in my life. Now, being in bonsai, I can confidently say it is the one thing I've discovered in my life. I know what I want to do now. I want to do bonsai. I want to make a career out of bonsai. I want to dedicate my life to this. That's 100%. Like that, you know, it's not, I feel so lucky that I've been able to figure that out. You know, I'm 27 now, but, you know, I was so afraid before. I was so afraid that I wasn't going to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And now I know I want to be in bonsai, dedicate my life to bonsai, the rest, you know, but how, I don't know yet.
That's totally fine. No, I
want to do my best and I want to learn as much as I can. And I take it one day at a time, and it's the same thing I do with my database. My database will always be free. I want to always find a way to contribute, always build myself for others. How can I share this knowledge? I have all this knowledge of potters. Okay, let me share it. I have all this all this knowledge of this. How do I make it easier to share? Right. I'm not money oriented. I've been very fortunate that I've never really had to worry about that. So that has allowed me to focus on just truly going after my passions.
Nice. So it sounds like from everything you've said, it's just that you're here to support the community. Like we started this podcast because we wanted to have an outreach for the community at large and just create this diorama of all things connected, right?
Yeah.
And show the love to where we've received the love in bonsai family. I mean, everyone, as you know, not everyone. There are some people maybe on the outskirts that are like, nah, okay. But as you've met, most everyone's are open arms with a tree in hand, like, here, help me work on this.
One of the greatest things I find is not necessarily specifically doing bonsai.
Right.
It's the community that surrounds bonsai. It's being able to share. I worked so hard on this tree. I'm so proud of it. I want to share that. You know, like look at my tree. Look at that sense of community is very powerful, right? Yeah. It wouldn't be nearly as fun if we didn't have friends and you didn't have a community that you could get nerdy with. You know, like So and that is such a big thing for me. The idea, and this is the reason why like I have discovered things I really like. You know,
Mm,
I like the idea of being a curator, you
mm,
know, because for example, I watched for those 6 months watching Chris and working at the garden, it felt like there was more purpose to your life,
right,
you know, than just for yourself.
right.
You're doing something that outlives you. You're working on trees. These things outlive you.
Mm,
They you every day I would go, you know, and this is not, I would have never experienced this otherwise. You go to the courtyards where they have all the display trees, and you stop for a moment, stop looking at the trees, and look at the people looking at the trees,
mm.
and you realize that look in their eyes, that the sense of wonder is the same sense of wonder I had when I first started getting into bonsai, and
Yeah,
I still have it today, but not the
yeah,
point, you know.
yeah.
You know, but like that moment that you can inspire, that feeling, like, you know, you go to like the Louvre, you go to a museum, and you see this amazing painting that moves you.
Mm,
That movement, that you're able to move somebody, that is what I really appreciated about being watching, you know, Chris, Michael, you know, being a curator, is that you're able to provide that to the community, you
right.
know, so it's bigger than just yourself.
Well, it's
Um,
like through a community comes exploration, but also knowing the fact that you planting or someone planting the seed of a tree that they'll never sit in the shade of. It's always
oh
for the
yeah,
next generation, right?
yeah,
I mean, that's what
exactly,
I feel with my daughter.
yeah,
Like we have a tree for her. I'm like, I'll never see this through. I'm hoping she will.
yeah,
You know?
exactly, yeah. It's I totally agree. That is probably the best thing to dedicate your life to.
Hmm.
Is something that you can feel proud of, that you are leaving something behind, that will positively impact people for
Hmm.
years to come. You know, I walk around the museum here at my apprenticeship now, and I look at these trees, and instead of just seeing them as trees, you see them kind of as people, the people that have worked on them. You
Yeah,
know,
like
you start,
something to look forward to, right? Like
yeah,
aspirational.
you start thinking about that tree is more than just a tree. It has a life. And
Yeah,
that's kind of going back to like the Yamaki pine. It has this amazing story to it,
right.
you know? And just the idea of me being able to, I'm part of that story.
Hmm.
It's such an honor. That idea that, you know, the trees that I remember when I first started bonsai, and I would see the pictures of the trees that I didn't even know they were at the National Museum. I saw Goshen for the first time. And I was like, oh my god, because that's one of my favorite trees of all time, you know. And oh, by the way, fun story about Goshen. When I first met Andy and he told me about the apprenticeship and everything, I saw Goshen and I asked him if I could touch Goshen, and he said no. He said no, and I said, I'm going to touch that tree. I'm going to make it happen. So now, after I think it's 2 years, 2 years of work, I have finally made my goal of touching Goshen.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah, so that was a big moment. But yeah, going through the museum and seeing these trees that have such a history, such a life to them, you
Hmm.
know, they've lived their own lives. They seem static and all that, but it's no different. I see it exactly the same way I see my cello. You know, when you're in music, especially with stringed instruments. One of the movies I like that comes to mind is like The Red Violin. If you've never seen it, it's a
Hmm.
very
Let me
good
check it
movie
out.
at displaying what I'm talking about here. It's this idea that the instrument has a life of
Hmm.
its own. It's You are one part of its journey,
Right.
right? And an interesting fact, a lot of people don't know this, with violins, violas, cellos, you know, all these stringed instruments. When they first get made, the wood that's made with is typically maple and spruce and, you know, some ebony, you know, and the as you play the instrument, um, the way it was described to me by the luthier that I worked for, uh, the the dead wood, right?
Hmm.
You look at the cell walls. If you go to a microscopic level, you have these cell walls that are rigid now. That
Right.
everything on the inside is dead. It's gone. You know, it's all dried up, but the walls are still there. Interestingly enough, the as you play the instrument over time, the way you play it affects which walls fall down.
Hmm.
Over time, those walls start to bend and fall. The
Right.
kind of, you know, the wood, the grain starts to, you know, settle. So because all that vibration, all that energy you're putting into it, it affects it. So in essence, you as a musician, when you play that instrument for so many years, you are leaving your voice in that instrument. That sound quality that's coming out of the instrument, that's developing out of it, because the more you play it, the more the sound develops, right? So how it develops is in part guided by the musician.
Directly influenced, just like tree work, like you were saying earlier.
It's directly influenced by the musician, right? So then when you think about violins that, like the Stradivarius or Guarneri violins that are multi-million-dollar violins, from the past, you think about the lives that they've had, the people that they've been passed down through, all these professionals, the reason why they'll only loan out those violins to the best of the best. It only keeps getting better, when you give it to the best. So that kind of idea that your personality, your soul stays with the instrument well after you're gone.
Right.
Same exact thing with bonsais. I see it exactly the same way. But instead of having a dead piece of wood that sounds beautiful, it's a live piece of wood.
Right. With some dead parts.
It's alive, yeah. Oh, that'd be pretty fun idea of having a bonsai worked for many, many generations. At some point it'll die and make an instrument out of it. It keeps going. It hasn't died.
Maybe you're on something there.
That's an idea. Yeah, so that's the way I see those trees at the museum. They have their lives that I'm a small part of it. But, that for me means the whole world.
Awesome. That's really cool. No, I think that really helps me understand that your advantageous spirit, but also your understanding of your life, you know what I mean? As you've done so many things now.
Yeah.
And your experience with Chicago, everything else. Like, I was saying, looking at the time, we've all talked 3 hours.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Bonsai Time podcast. Now, we're doing something a little bit different. We've broken up Angelica's interview into multiple pieces. So to hear the next part of our interview with her, we'll see you back here in 1 week. And bonsai on.
Yes. To find more information on the podcast, please check out our Instagram page, Bonsai Time Podcast, and our website, bonsaitimepodcast.com. To stay in touch with us, Kevin's Instagram is Kevin_Ferris, PNW, and Ryan's website is Rai2tree2.com. You can find these links in the description below. Thank you for listening, and bonsai on.